Hi there, my name's Georgie and I'm from Itty Bitty Acres and I am the gluten-free sourdough mama. It is my absolute pleasure to bring you this gluten-free starter that I'm sure you've been searching for, possibly tried to make and it didn't work out so well. I have done all the trials and tribulations and had all the wins and failures, so I really hope from my heart and my family to you that you love this loaf, that it becomes a staple in your home, and that you get all those beautiful flavors and textures and everything that you remember out of bread, because that's the whole reason I'm doing this for everybody. So let's get into mixing your bread. Firstly, I've got my beautiful beloved starter Oscar here, bubbling away and ready to be used. And I'll just show you how I drag him. And you can see he's like chocolate mousse, he's all bubbled up, active and ready to make a great loaf. This is what you want from your starter because this will give you the amazing rise and the crumb in your bread. So grab your scales. If you haven't used your scales for a while, it would be a good idea to check that they're weighing properly and also that the battery isn't going to conk out on you because that has happened to a few people. So pop your scales on. Put your bowl on and tear the weight so that it's at zero and you're not weighing the bowl. We're going to open our beautiful packet of bread mix, and there's two components to your packet. So you've got a flaxseed psyllium husk component and then you've got the beautiful flour mix component. And the first one we're going to use is the flaxseed and psyllium husk because gluten-free flours don't like to go together. They don't want to get married, they don't want to go on a date, and we're trying to bind them together. So we're going to tip all this good stuff into the bowl, and then we're going to weigh out 350 grams of water and mix it together. So I've got my water here. Again, I'm going to tear my scales and put 350 grams of water in. Slowly. Awesome. And then grab your dough hook if you have one. This is a baker's bestest friend. It's really amazing whisk for cakes, eggs, bread especially, anything that you want to mix up quickly and don't want to get your hands in. But if you don't have one of these, just use your fork. And you're just going to mix this up until all of the dry bits are now wet. And we're just going to let it sit for a few minutes so that it gets gluggy and glue-like because we want the loaf to bind together really beautifully. So now that you've let your psyllium husk and your flaxseed gel together, this is the texture that you should have. And now what we're going to do is add our beautiful Oscar starter to the mix. So pop your scales back on and tear them to zero so that you're only weighing the weight of Oscar the starter. And we want 310 grams of beautiful, bubbly, active starter. Now you should have some left over, and that's totally right because you want some left over so that you can make more starter again and make more bread again forever and ever and ever. So weigh out your 310, that's mine. Right, I've got starter left over. And now you're just going to mix these together until there's no streaks in the mix. And sometimes that can take a few seconds because it doesn't want to marry together, but we're going to make it. So now you've got this beautiful white beige mix happening. We're going to open the flour packet and tip in the beautiful organic flour mix. These are all organic. I'm very passionate about organics. I don't know why you go to all the effort of making such a beautiful sourdough loaf and eat crappy ingredients. So this blend is very dear to my heart and very special. Okay, and don't forget, salt's very important in sourdough. It slows down the fermentation process so that it doesn't overproof and become a big puffy mess. So pop your 1.5 teaspoons of sea salt in. And then we're going to mix. If you don't have a dough hook, you could use a spatula and just try and get it all mixed through together. But at some point you'll probably have to put your hand in just to finish it off. And what we're going for is all of the dry bits mixed in, so it's a wet mass of dough. If your bowl's a little bit hard to handle, let's say it's a bit light, you can grab your tea towel and pop it underneath, and that will give you a bit more tension on the bench so that you can really get in and stir it up good. I can't talk and stir, it's a bit rigorous. Okay. You can't really overstir this at this point, but obviously be a little bit cautious and use common sense, and once all the dry bits are wet, you can stop because that is your dough loaf. And that's the texture that we're looking for. So scrape off whatever utensil you've used, or scrape your fingers off if you need to. And there's our beautiful gluten-free sourdough dough ball. Now we're going to shape it. This process is actually really, really quick to make a sourdough loaf. Because it's gluten-free, we're not doing hours of prep to create a gluten structure. So what you really need to focus on is making sure your starter is absolutely amazing, optimal, well-fed, got beautiful bubbles and everything. That's what's going to give you the great loaf. So I've got my feed my starter mix flour here, just a little bit. I'm going to pop this water over here, flour my bench. Only flour your bench slightly like this, and I say that because this dough really likes to suck up flour, and the hydration in your dough will kind of cause it to crack a little bit if there's too much flour. So we're not dumping flour on the bench like you do with pizza dough. We're just giving it a gentle sprinkle. Okay, put your dominant hand together with your fingers together, not spread apart because that'll cause dough to fall through, but you're kind of creating a scoop with your hand, and just gently scoop the dough out. Even though I know it's sticky, it's going to stay together in this nice ball. And then what you'll do, if you want to flour your hands, you can. That's where I use predominantly most of the flour now. And I just gently sort of fold it over and start shaping it until I find a nice little area that looks beautiful with no cracks. And that's sort of what I'm looking for in my dough. I haven't touched it that much. I haven't been kneading it and pushing it and grinding it. I'm just trying to give it as much life in there as possible, because what the starter is doing now that you've added it, it's starting to munch away and feed on the beautiful organic flours, and that's going to create the rise and beautiful crumb inside your dough. So you don't want to be pressing this and compressing it. You want it to come up, not down. So that's beautiful. You can give it a bit of a stretch like that if you want to, but I'm really happy with that shape because I'm going to cook this round loaf. Then what I'm going to do is move my baskets, and we'll talk about those in just a sec. I'm going to grab my bench scraper, and I'm going to use my left hand, because my right hand's dominant, as a guide to pick up the dough. Because no matter how gently I try and pick this up, I'm going to squash it and compress it, right? So if you can, you could use a spatula if you really needed to. I'm going to slide this under, use my hand as a guide, and pop it on the paper, and I've barely touched the dough loaf and haven't squashed it at all. So now my loaf is beautifully shaped. I'm going to sprinkle the top with the feed my starter mix just so that it doesn't stick, and I'm going to pop it in this size sort of shaped dessert bowl or soup bowl on the paper. And the reason that I'm doing that, see how it's a little bit tight to get in there? As I put this in the fridge to proof overnight, I want the dough to rise up. I don't want it to go flat like a ciabatta. I want a loaf that's up and round and beautiful and full. So if I put this in, let's say, my mixing bowl, it would leave room for it to spread and not be a beautiful round loaf. So that's the reason I've chosen this tight bowl, so that it proofs up in the fridge. The other option for you, if you have a proofing basket and really want to get into being an amazing sourdough, this is a proofing basket. This is what all bakers use for traditional sourdough and gluten-free. And the reason these are so amazing is because they give a beautiful shape. It allows you to tip the dough out when we want to score the loaf, so make all the beautiful patterns before we bake it. And it allows air to get in here to allow the dough to proof sort of evenly. Either or is fine. I'm just giving you best practice, and I'm a bit partial to these obviously because I'm a perfectionist with dough. So in this instance, what I would do would be, I'm going to take my dough off the paper. I'm going to bench that method. And I just grab a tea towel, and this is now going to act as the liner for your basket. I take a little bit of the Feed My Starter mix and sprinkle it on so that the dough doesn't stick. And I'm going to pick up my loaf again, but this time tip it upside down. So the top is now on the bottom and the bottom is now on the top. So this is the bottom of my loaf. I'm going to sprinkle it again so that it doesn't stick, and I'm going to wrap it up with the tea towel and pop it in the fridge overnight to ferment. If you are going to use the baking paper with the dessert bowl method, totally fine. Just put a lid over it. You could put a plate on top, or you could put a tea towel on top, or if you've got like a little silicone cover or a beeswax, that's great. So either method that you use, we're now going to pop these in the fridge overnight because it's going to give you the slow fermentation that you read about on sourdough, 36-hour fermentation. That's true, but what that is from the beginning of feeding your starter and the fermenting it does to then adding it into your bread mix and putting it in the fridge to ferment overnight. So that's where that 36-hour period comes from. I love the overnight fridge method, one, because it fits in with my lifestyle, but two, because it allows the flours to hydrate, it allows the fermentation to create more flavour, and you just get this beautiful even loaf of heaven basically. So pop it in the fridge and I'll check back in with you guys tomorrow, and we're going to bake our beautiful gluten-free bread. Now it's time to get ready to bake your gluten-free sourdough. So if you have a Dutch oven, now's the time to grab it. We're going to turn the oven on to 250 degrees on fan forced, and we're going to put the Dutch oven in at the same time. If you're not baking in a Dutch oven and you're using a loaf tin, that's totally fine as well. Turn your oven on to 250 degrees Celsius and put it on fan forced for 30 minutes so that the oven is raging hot to bake my loaf of bread, because you've got this big ball of dough and you need to get the heat right into the center so that the middle cooks really well too. And what this Dutch oven does is it creates an oven within the oven. So traditional bakers and professional bakers have beautiful steam ovens with lots of beautiful settings, and they can have the temperature absolutely perfect. My oven is very average, and so what I want to do is try and mimic a baker's oven, and how that happens best is by using a Dutch oven, popping it into the oven and creating a raging hot, even temperature around your bread. So make sure you've got really good oven mitts, because this little guy gets really hot. I've got my beautiful dough ball out of the fridge that we cold proofed overnight, and what I do is open up the tea towel, grab my piece of baking paper and very gently flip the dough so that it is sunny side up, and there's your beautiful loaf ready to be baked. The shape is holding really lovely, and if you'd like to get that contrast of when you're scoring with the white and the brown of the bread, this is how you do it. You can take a tea strainer, grab some of your Feed My Starter mix, and gently tap on top. This is very professional. This is how a lot of people who are really crazy about sourdough do it. I don't usually do this, I'm just showing you. I usually just grab a little handful of this and rub it on top nicely like so. There we go. Now, this is a lame, and it's used for scoring bread professionally. And I really advocate having one of these because the razor blade is super thin, and as you do the scoring, it won't tear down or break apart any of those beautiful gas bubbles that you've created in the bread. You can use a sharp kitchen knife. I know they're really sharp, but they are much thicker in the metal than a razor blade is. So use that for now, the kitchen knife, if you have it. But if you really love and fall in love with sourdough, like I'm sure you will, think about getting a lamb because it's a game changer with doing the beautiful patterns as well. So I'm going to do a little wheat stalk, and the way that I do that is evenly nick the bread with even lines down towards me. And then I'm going to do a little ear where I go 2/3 of the way in and I cut on a curve, not straight down like this. So I'm fully committed to this and I'm cutting on the curve down. Beautiful. So now it's time to put it in the oven. Okay, I've just got my very well-loved, shall we say, Dutch oven out of the oven, and this is where you want to work quickly. I gently pick the loaf up by the paper and put her in the oven, being very careful not to burn myself. Pop your oven mitts back on and pop this in the oven. You're now going to set a timer for 45 minutes. So we're going to bake at 250 degrees Celsius for 45 minutes. And it's such a long bake because gluten-free flours are really thick and stodgy, and we want to make sure that the temperature gets right into the middle of the dough, and also to give your loaf the best chance of getting the best rise. You've only got about 20 to 25 minutes with gluten-free flour to get the rise. The rest of the baking time is just to bake the loaf. So don't forget to set your timer for 45 minutes and we'll come back and take the lid off real soon. The reason that you score a sourdough loaf is, one, yes, it looks beautiful, but two, it's because dough will always find the weakest seam to burst out of if you haven't given it a seam. So by scoring the dough with a wheat stalk and an ear, you're giving it even seams so that it can just rise like this. If we didn't cut the dough at all or score the dough, it would find the weakest seam in the dough area and just burst out of it like a burst couch. And if you like that look, that's fine, but you probably don't. So scoring is definitely the way to go. Now it's time for the big reveal. This is always the most nerve-wracking part for me, just in case the scoring hasn't turned out beautiful, but I'm sure it will. And even if it doesn't, your bread will always taste fabulous. So my timer went off at 45 minutes and I have my mitts on because this is raging hot, and here she is. Oh, look at how beautiful. So I've got this beautiful wheat stalk and the beautiful ear scored. So I'm going to put this back in on 230 degrees Celsius for 20 minutes. So here she is in all her glory. We've got really beautiful rise and a beautiful scoring pattern. This is still raging hot, so very gently I grab the paper and I pull her out onto the cooling rack. The crust will feel quite firm, but as it cools down, she will soften. And what I do like to do, what's really a good practice is, if you can grab a thermometer, if you have one at home, a meat thermometer, a milk thermometer, or a candy thermometer, and just find a hole, just so you don't upset the pattern, where you could pop this in. And I like to take the temperature of the middle of the loaf. So middle of the loaf and halfway into the middle of it. If it's at 95 degrees or over, it's definitely cooked. And it's creeping up nicely. It's just gone past 95 to 100. So that's great. I know this loaf is beautifully cooked. Now I'm sorry you cannot cut your hot bread for at least an hour. And there's a reason for that, and it's good, I'll tell you why. One, if you cut into this right now, it'll be really sticky and gummy. All the heat in there is still working its magic to create beautiful crumb inside. And two, which is the most important one, if you cut that hot bread and the cold air in this room hits it, it closes up all the beautiful air bubbles that we've created in there and will give you a brick of a loaf. So please, please listen to me. I know it's very tempting, but let her sit on the bench for at least an hour, and then as you cut the loaf, it will be like the perfect, most sensational loaf you've had. So this sourdough is going to change your life. It's so soft, you can have a sandwich with it. You will now be in sandwich heaven. It's great for lunch boxes. It's great for dinner time. You could slice up this loaf but not touch it to the bottom, so they've got to pull apart. You could stuff cheese and garlic through it and just put it back in the oven to melt all that and then pull it out. This is a real game changer. It's gut healthy, it's made with a beautifully fermented sourdough, and I really, really hope that it has brought you a world of joy baking it as well as eating it. So now that we're at the end of our bake and you don't have to listen to me ramble on anymore, I just wanted to tell you how proud I am of you, how amazing your bread is, and what an awesome thing you have done for your gut and for your family's gut. This bread has no nasties in it. You have created an amazing starter and baked in the old ways of traditional sourdough. This is awesome for sandwiches, great for lunch boxes, and I really hope that it becomes a staple in your home and that you really create beautiful memories baking and also eating this with your loved ones. So I just wanted to say a massive, massive thank you for coming on this sourdough journey with me. I hope that it's made you really happy, really confident. I hope you're super proud of yourself. I hope you've eaten some delicious flavors and bread that you haven't had for a long time. And most importantly, I really hope it's brought joy to your kitchen and your home and your family. These are online on my website, ittybittyacres.com.au, and they're actually available on subscription because we all want a fresh loaf of bread each week, right? So you can set up a subscription, you get 10% off, and that can come either fortnightly or monthly, whatever you like. And that way you always know that you've got bread or focaccia in the pantry and you can pull out your sourdough starter and bake anytime that you want to. So just remember, your sourdough starter is alive. It's a live culture that is always happy. It just might be a little bit asleep, but it's always alive and ready to make bread if you feed it and activate it properly. These come together online as a kit as well, in a big beautiful bag ready for you to get started on your sourdough journey, and then you can just individually purchase what you want as you need it. It's a beautiful gift for Christmas, it's a beautiful gift for birthdays, it's a beautiful gift for someone having a hard time that might just need some therapy, dough therapy at home, and some personal space to do something for themselves. The aroma of fresh bread baking in your house is just magical. So please do tell your family and friends for me, that would be great. Especially people who are gluten-free. This is a real game changer for anybody that's celiac or really gluten intolerant. I would love to be able to share this with them. So thank you so much for joining me. Please feel free to contact me anytime on the website or Instagram. I hope that you're super proud of yourself and everything you've accomplished in your kitchen with your baking over the last couple of days. And I really, really hope that you have fallen in love with sourdough as much as I have. This is a beautiful tradition to start baking with your children and your family and eating with them and creating great memories around bread.